Great. The seed strategy was signed. It was developed by the Federal Committee of the Plant Conservation Alliance, along with several of our partners, and we'll talk about the Plant Conservation Alliance here in a minute. It was signed in August 2015. It calls for an unprecedented level of collaboration, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to get this out on a webinar, so that folks know that if they're working on things that are part of the seed strategy, we want to hear about it. We want to help you implement the strategy in an even stronger, more effective way. As I said, it was developed by the Plant Conservation Alliance, and it's the only seed strategy that we know of in the world. And we did get a request about that at the SER meeting, Society for Ecological Restoration meeting, which was in England 2 years ago. And no other country in the world had done one. So we're really proud that we were able to get this accomplished. But we need everybody's help to get it implemented. So this just shows you that it's 12 federal agencies. The federal committee is led by the BLM. The Plant Conservation Alliance also has a non-federal committee, which any of you folks that are in the field want to join, your agency or organization wants to join in as a non-federal partner. We've got about 360 non-federal partners. 9 of them are international partners. And this is the memorandum of agreement that was signed back in 2014, saying that we were committed federal agencies to work on developing the seed strategy and on implementing it. The 360 non-federal cooperators are across the United States. You can see here that they go from Alaska all the way down to Florida. And we are accepting non-federal cooperators at any time that folks want to join in with us. Please, and please do so. So why do we need a national seed strategy? We're trying to build resiliency into the American landscape. And I think this week was one of those times with these extreme weather events that we saw. We are going to need to build that infrastructure or build that resiliency into the infrastructure so it can serve us well and better, and to lessen the impacts of these severe weather events. Also, these healthy native plant communities are helpful to protecting people, homes, and businesses in both emergency situations and non-emergency situations, basically. So let's talk a little bit more. The 21st century is seeing record-setting temperatures with associated impacts from wildfires, floods, hurricanes, droughts. 2016 was the warmest year in 137 years of federal record keeping. I'm not sure where 2017 will fall, but it's also been a fairly warm year. 2016 was the 3rd consecutive year to set a new global annual temperature record. So the first 16 years of the 21st century are among the 17 warmest on record. Let's give you some examples of some of the issues and how native seed and native plants play into that. This is a 2011 Bastrop County, Texas wildfire. It was the largest, most destructive wildfire in Texas history. It burned 32,400 acres, and it burned the westernmost population of the loblolly pine. And that loblolly pine was a hardy, drought-tolerant seed and population with that gene in it. Some really wonderful foresters thought ahead and put 10,000 seed of this from this population into a grocer's warehouse refrigerator. And after the entire population was burned down, they went back in, and luckily those seeds were still viable. So that was really serendipity, and that's not the way we need to be managing our seed resources here in the United States. And that's one of the reasons that we decided we needed to have a strategy that would work for all of us across all our lands, and it wouldn't work ad hoc or just by chance. one of the things that we in the West, and I work for the Bureau of Land Management, which we manage most of the lands that we manage are in the West. They're about 1/10 of the United States land acres. And what we are experiencing right now are mega fires, and that is any fire that is over 250,000 acres. So you can see 27% of the fires that we've had on BLM lands from 2006 to 2015 were these huge, huge fires. We need a large amount of seed to go in after those fires and to ensure that we're not getting invasives, and to make sure that we're getting the keeping the soil in place, etc. The next one the next example of what I wanted to talk about was Hurricane Sandy in 2012. A total of $65 billion combined damages in 24 states. 1 million dune stabilizing plants were needed, and there were no local plants that were available at that point in time. About a week prior to that, our partners at Greenbelt Native Plant Nursery had realized that they did not have the germplasm from the Mid-Atlantic and went out and collected it. But it's going to take 5 years to get that number, 1 million dune stabilizing beach grasses, ready for production. So we set up what we call Seeds of Success in the East. We got a grant from the Department of Interior, and we established it in 2014, and we've made over 1,600 collections in 2 years, and we're in the process of 2017 field season right now, and we expect another 600 species. So I guess none of us are forgetting Hurricane Harvey, and we don't even have the stats on Hurricane Irma. But the estimates for Hurricane Harvey are up to $190 billion combined damages in the states of Texas and Louisiana. Harvey dropped 40 to 52 inches of rainfall in the southeast Texas and southwest Louisiana. And these are the stats that we know of right now. Two of Houston's wettest days on record occurred during Harvey, and that was 16.7 inches of rain and 8.37 inches of rain. For Hurricane Irma, we know that we've got 52 people have died in the Caribbean, 19 have died in the US. Florida has already spent $250 million on this. Hurricane Irma is ranked 7th in intense landfall for the United States. So let's talk a little bit about this strategy and how we can help and what we plan to do. There are 4 goals for the seed strategy. The first is to assess the seed needs nationwide. And while we're doing that assessment, we want to also be collecting seeds through our Seeds of Success program, as well as getting growers ready to do more of the production of the source identified seed that we're going to be collecting. The second goal is to conduct research. The third is to develop these tools and really for us to translate the science from the research to the land managers so that they know how to use that science. And the fourth is to ensure good communications. And I think the webinar and things are what we're working on right now. I think that how I view our success for the seed strategy is that we are building a network of networks. And I think you will see that in the next 2 presentations that come up. So I'm going to hand it over then to you, Sarah and Fred. And we'll take questions when we finish up.
All right, we're going to take control.
And while you're taking the control, I just would say the network of networks would be, we would have a network of seed collectors, we'll have a network of seed growers, we'll have a network of seed researchers, a network of restoration ecologists, and a network of seed storage facilities, so that we can be connected and moving across the United States, getting the right seed in the right place at the right time.
So are my slides up?
I'm not seeing it, Fred. I'm seeing a black.
Yeah, Fred, I
something.
don't see your slides either. That we've got a just kind of a gray screen. I was able to see that. I actually can see Sarah's laptop screen behind that, though.
I almost think, Kate, it's yours that's coming up with this black screen, because I can't see you talking when you talk.
Can you see anything now?
No.
Okay, hang on.
Now I see you and Fred in the room.
I think it's our day for technical difficulties, I think.
There we go. There we go.
Hey!
Hey, thank you, Sarah. Okay, so I work for the BLM. I work for Peggy. What else do I want to say about that? It's a wild ride. What I'm going to talk to you today is some of our experiences in the Great Basin. BLM, and Peggy in particular, has taken an eco-regional approach for organizing how BLM gets native plant materials development and how we partner with state agencies, other federal agencies to get them on board. I'm one of 3 eco-regional coordinators. BLM has one in the Colorado Plateau and one in the Mojave. So I'm just going to share my experiences and our collaboration with Fish and Wildlife Service and Forest Service. Dirk was going to give this presentation, but he's not here. He really wanted to do it. I looked at his slides and I realized we think very differently. So I'm not using his slides. So this is all my fault if this doesn't come across very well. So going to the next slide. Well, I guess from the title slide, I want you to see we're in the sagebrush sea, right? That's kind of what the basin has been called. It's dominated by sagebrush, and there's a good picture of it. Okay. Some of our challenges in the Great Basin. We're managing for sage-grouse. That's a sort of a flagship species over here. And it's actually a pretty good one because sage-grouse uses multiple habitat types, and there's degradation going on in all of the different habitat types. One of the biggest threats is burning, is fire. And so up on the screen here, you can see just very recent data from September 8th of this year, how much of the Great Basin, and in particular sage-grouse habitat, has burned this year alone. And so if you total up the columns for greater sage-grouse habitat, it's about 1.2 acres have burned this year. This is kind of just touches back to what Peggy talked about. The Great Basin has been experiencing some pretty terrific climate extremes. Over the past 5 years, we've been in a drought. And so things have been going off that way, and we've been losing species, and rangelands have been degraded because of the drought. This year, this winter in particular, the Sierra had some of the largest snowpack it had, and as a result, some of our rivers flooded. So climate change, it's about the extremes, and that's what we can do regionally and nationally to make a difference, make it better. Okay, so the result of fire, coupled with fire in the Great Basin, invasive, non-native invasive annual grasses, in particular cheatgrass, is the cause of it. Cheatgrass, oh, I'm going to defer to Sarah on this, but I'm just going to pull this out, was introduced in the 1800s into the Great Basin, and it has exploded. So what I've got up on what you can see now is a map. This is from Chambers et al. 2017, and this is part of the Common Science Framework for restoration and conservation and restoration in the Great Basin that BLM and partners are working on. What this figure shows you, and the take-home message really is the Great Basin is losing its capacity to recover from both fire and its resistance to cheatgrass. So basically, cheatgrass comes in. This is a sad story. It's in other ecoregions as well. It competes with natives. It creates a fine fuel load that burns more quickly. And then you get repeat fire intervals, and it basically goes downhill from there. So another take-home message from the slide is, at least in sort of the Nevada, Oregon, and a bit of southern Idaho, we can't expect just natural recovery to happen on its own. we're gonna need native seed to push it along. Next slide. Okay, this is for me the best reason to care about native seed. This slide came from Peggy, stole from her years ago. It's the results of a study by the Idaho Department of Transportation, Sands and Moser, 2013. And what they did, they looked back. There was a common garden experiment that was planted in 1987. They collected seed and grew them into plants from, oh my goodness, at least 13 different locations. And they planted them in these common garden sites. 2 of them disappeared by the time 2010 arrived. In 2010, they resampled. They looked at how many plants that were planted survived and where they came from. And this was just kind of an anecdotal study. And lo and behold, the plants that were collected from seed from Glens Ferry and were put back on the site had pretty much the highest success. They had basically 100% survival. Well, probably not quite, but about that. So you can see even the next best is less than 50% survivorship. That's a pretty impressive reason to care about the seed source you use, right? Okay, we get seed in various different ways, and I'm going to talk about those in a few minutes. But there's problems with both approaches, right? The agronomic approach, it's really a poor fit sometimes. Sometimes the germplasm, and I'll show you, this doesn't necessarily fit with the ecosystem. It doesn't restore natural population structure and functioning. If done incorrectly, it could disrupt ecological relationships of the existing plant community, and it could undermine future resistance and resilience. We don't know. Local is best. That's sort of a paradigm that's been around since the 80s for restoration. You know, you get the seed from near your site, you put it back on your site. It takes a lot of time. If you have a large site, you may be 5 years in with seed collections and seed increase before you have quantities of seed you need to do your restoration work. This can be quite an investment, and if it's a small conservation area, you may not have that option. And this is something, the next one we're running into, local seed sources may not exist anymore. In the Great Basin, the low elevation, the drier sites that we're looking for, and the germplasm from those sites, hotter and drier, just don't exist anymore because of fire and cheatgrass. So this is going to be a bigger problem nationwide. And then climate change. We know, we have data that show that plant distributions have changed in the last 30 years. So the seed from the germplasm from your source may not be appropriate, may not be the best. So these are some pretty big challenges regardless of ecoregion, but we're gonna face them, we have a solution. I'm gonna touch on, this is the agronomic seed, and so where does seed come from right now for the Great Basin? What do we use? Well, it's mostly grasses because they can be produced in larger scale. Mostly cultivars because that's what's on the market and that's what industry is producing for us. Most of these cultivars are from the northern part and essentially outside of the Great Basin. So what you see on this slide, the green patch is the Great Basin. And if you look at the stars, that's where all these different cultivars originated from. So you can really see in the Great Basin, only one cultivar actually originated from the Great Basin, and it was actually from a higher elevation site. So this is a problem for us, and not just us, but nationwide. Okay, how do they get cultivars? So this, got this slide from Beth Ledger. Basically, this slide shows the list of traits. They went through the literature and recorded how many times a particular, what the traits the cultivar was selected for. And so you can see at the top of the graph, forage, yield, and quality was the biggest one. They're selecting for big plants that produce lots of biomass for range for cows, basically to eat. That's a big driver here in the Great Basin. Seed yield, because you want something that produces a lot of seed commercially. I love all the way down, you know, it goes down to the bottom. Beauty is even one of the reasons that something's selected for. These are all great, but they don't necessarily match with what we need in wildlands. Beth Ledger's, some of her research is showing that smaller plants do better. So if we're putting these cultivars out that are very large, we may be setting ourselves up for failure, because the smaller ones, smaller biomass, there seems to be something that tips their survivorship and their survivability better. Okay, so how do we get better seed, right? We talked about some of the problems. It's all about partnerships. For us, it's about combining the agronomic and localist best approaches using seed transfer guidance. So seed transfer guidance is gonna be our key for bridging the gap between sort of these two different approaches, right? We can take the best of the agronomic, we can take the production practices, and then we can, the localist best, we can take the consideration for germplasm source into account. And then the next big thing that we need to do is develop partnerships. So this slide here shows the native plant materials development and plant procurement cycle. There's lots of steps involved. There's lots of room for partnerships in the Great Basin. BLM has a partnership, a very close partnership with Fish and Wildlife Service and the Forest Service, and that's what Sarah's going to talk about, some of the aspects of that partnership and what we're doing on a local level. To move this forward, there's certainly room for folks from the natural areas and any other groups involved. I think that's probably good enough on that one. Okay, what is seed transfer guidance? And I'm going to pick it up a little bit. I'm a little over time here. It was developed in the 1920s. And so the take-home message on this slide is that it's not a new thing, right? It was so successful in the 60s, they put it into policy. There's two flavors of seed transfer guidance. The first is provisional, and that's based primarily on temperature and precipitation. And that's the map you see of the United States right there. That's from Bauer et al. He published the first provisional seed transfer zone maps for the United States. And the other flavor of that is empiric guidance. So empiric guidance basically is developed from provisional guidance, but then it also incorporates genetic information, typically from common garden experiments, but also from genetic analysis. Okay. The other partnership, and that's driving this forward, is the Great Basin Native Plant Project. Peggy has been investing BLM resources for at least 17 years in the Great Basin, probably to the tune of $20 million over that time. This partnership has developed much of the research that has gone out into fire rehabilitation, into production practices for native species. We still have this partnership. It's still going on. It's between BLM and the Rocky Mountain Research Station, but we're bringing on board Fish and Wildlife Service and anybody else who kind of is interested in helping us and participating. This year, we initiated we have a total of 31 or 32 projects going on. We initiated 6 new projects. We have 24 projects that are ongoing, and then we're finishing up 1 project this year too. This partnership is developing the empiric seed transfer guidance that I mentioned, and that Sarah's going to talk about a little bit more in the next talk. And this partnership is also doing the research and development to get these things into commercial production, and the research and development to use them effectively. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, BLM, Fish and Wildlife Service, Forest Service, we're trying to coordinate our efforts, and we're trying to pull together so that we can provide one market, we can encourage the seed industry. So we have multi-agency seed collection teams. We've identified a list of priority species, and that's what you see here in this table. There's 6 priority grasses, 6 priority forbs, and we selected these forbs together and grasses together. We have empiric guidance for probably most of the grasses, and we're working toward empiric guidance for the forbs. And I think I'm going to leave it at that and turn this over to Sarah so she can talk about what we're doing sort of locally.
This is fun. We're in the same room, so we're doing this like quick, fun switch. So let me get my PowerPoint up now. So can you guys all see that? I'm gonna go with yes. So I'm going to talk to you guys about the grassroots approach to plant materials development. So picking up on some more of the local projects we're doing here in the state of Nevada with all of our partners. I apologize for like the sun on my face. I'm trying to get out of this sun. We're in a room. We tried shutting the blinds, but it's not working. So anyways, as Fred mentioned, there's a lot of fires going on right now. And in Nevada, we need a lot of seed. And so if you look at this table, which you saw on Fred's slide, almost 1 million acres of sage-grouse habitat has burned this year. Or in the state of Nevada in particular. And in Nevada, this is the most sage-grouse acreage in all Western states. And we're going to need a lot of seed to restore the damage caused by these fires. And of course, as Fred was mentioning, getting enough of the right seed comes with its challenges. So for example, we need native seed now because we just had a ton of fires. But native seed collections take time, 1 to 2 years. Research and development takes time, 2 to 5 years. And increasing seed in a grow-out setting on a farm takes 1 to 3 years. We also need to overcome the perception that native seed doesn't work and is too expensive. And there's no direct funding line for native plants in any of the federal budgets. So through my portion of the presentation, I'm going to highlight some of the projects that we are working on at the local level to start to address some of these challenges that we face. And as I go through my slides, pay attention to the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, which will indicate which goal of the National Seed Strategy a project is addressing. And so remember the wheel of plant material development that Fred showed at the end of in his presentation? Collecting the right native seed is the first step of the wheel and addresses goal 1 of the National Seed Strategy. As Fred discussed, we established a regional list of priority species for the 2017 collecting season. These species are prioritized on demand, habitat restoration needs, and fire history. Our seed collectors also focused on collecting a species' genetic diversity across the seed zone. So this means that our seed collection teams did not collect from just one place, and they worked with teams across the species distribution in a particular seed zone to capture its full genetic diversity. So to actually increase that seed and get it into a farm grow-out situation in a seed zone, we need 10 or more collections to maximize genetic diversity and to account for differences in things like elevation across the species range. So how do we even begin to think about this? Fred explained what provisional seed zones are, and I'm going to explain how we use them to inform seed collection decisions. So this map shows all 20 of the provisional seed zones in the Great Basin. And I realize this looks like a giant colorful mess, but doing a simple acreage calculation in GIS, we were able to discern that 3 of these provisional seed zones are the most dominant in the Great Basin, which I indicated with that star symbol. We further chopped up this colorful mess by clipping into sage-grouse priority management areas called SFAs, or sagebrush focal areas, and PHMAs, which are priority habitat management areas. We also did the same clipping exercise for wildfire history from 2000 to 2016. So the map on the screen shows what this clip looks like for sage-grouse SFAs and PHMAs. So now look at the chart on the right-hand side of the screen. The stars indicate the 3 zones most dominant overall from the previous slide, and the sage-grouse indicate which zones are most important for sage-grouse habitat, and then the flames indicate which zones burn the most in wildfire events. Do you guys notice anything? There's 4 that stick out. So from this exercise, our seed collection crews focused on collecting seeds for our 4 species, which don't have empirical seed zones, from these 4 zones. And so for species that have empirical seed zones, so remember that's taking that climate information and pairing it with genetic information. Empiric seed zones are species specific. And so this map is showing an empirical seed zone for one of our target grasses, Poa secunda, or Sandberg's bluegrass. There are 10 empirical seed zones for Poa secunda. If you look quickly at this map, 4 colors really jump out at you: the pink, the teal, the light blue, and the dark blue. But when we started looking at sage-grouse priority habitat in areas that burn the most, we ended up with 2 focus zones. And you can see my symbols there, the stars, the little sage-grouse, and the fires. So our seed collection crews focused on collecting Poa secunda in the light blue and pink empirical zones for this species. And so the same exercise was done for the 5 other grasses in our priority collection list that have empirical seed zones. So switching gears from seed collecting and focusing on research, which is goal 2 of the National Seed Strategy, we are working with the University of Nevada, Reno on a project that looks at the use of non-traditional native species in seed mixes. And so this project was funded by Fish and Wildlife Service, BLM, and Nevada Department of Wildlife. And this research started because native annuals occupy a similar niche to cheatgrass and are a component of sage-grouse chick diets. And additional research has shown that Imsinkia tessellata, or bristly fiddleneck, can also suppress cheatgrass. And there's a picture of that in this bottom left-hand corner of the right-hand side of your screen. And that's a picture of the researcher at UNR that's studying this, collecting seed with this like totally awesome Ghostbuster-looking machine, and she's sucking it up. UNR is working on techniques for collection, germination, propagation for these annual forb species. And then this research will help add early successional pathways into restoration seed mixes. The next steps of this project are field trials to evaluate establishment of these annual forbs in the rehabilitation and restoration setting. So another project we're working on that's focusing on goal 3 of the National Seed Strategy, we are looking at developing seed venues to inform restoration decisions. And this is a long-term goal for the establishment of a tool that will be very helpful for land managers making restoration decisions in sagebrush communities. It will ensure that species do not get seeded in communities that they are not appropriate for, and will help make seeding choices that would help restore continuous and overlapping flowering and seed production during the growing season. So on the right-hand side of this slide, we created a mock-up of what this tool may look like for a Wyoming sagebrush community. And so to make seed selections for a Wyoming sagebrush community, you want to select species both by type or their habit and across a bloom time, which would ensure that a seed mix is composed of a diverse group of species that would protect and enhance ecological diversity. So our species are color-coded by type. So green are perennial grasses, blue is shrubs, orange is perennial forbs, and yellow is an annual forb. And then the bar length indicates the months a species is flowering. And then, of course, there would be a component of this where seed selections would also be matched to appropriate seed zones. And as more species become available on the market, we envision that these would be kind of a living document that would expand in number of species for a particular community type based on what starts to become available. And so finally, thinking about seed farmers and growers has us addressing goals 1 and 4 of the National Seed Strategy. So in March of 2017, spearheaded by the Nevada Department of Agriculture, Nevada federal and state partners came together and hosted a Nevada Native Seed Forum to educate potential growers in Nevada about the National Seed Strategy. So 2 of the big things that came out of this meeting was we set a common terminology so that we were using terms in the same way. So terms like cultivar and seed zone, making sure we really understood what those meant to each other and to all our different agencies. And then we discussed the roles of local, state, and federal governments in National Seed Strategy implementation. We are also working with economists at UNR to evaluate the economics of market capacity and potential for a Nevada seed industry. And so they're helping us answer questions like, what is the current capacity to grow native seed by private growers in Nevada? What is the anticipated need for seed? Are there current economic incentives for native seed production? And then are there alternate policies that can encourage the growth of a seed industry here in Nevada? And so what will our success ultimately look like? So as Peggy alluded to, it's this whole networks on networks interaction. And so nationwide, there are networks that are interacting the national, regional, and local levels, which I hope this presentation helped demonstrate how we all are interacting at those different levels. And then in that network, we have seed collectors and researchers and farmers and nurseries and seed storage facilities, restoration ecologists and botanists. And that National Seed Strategy is a document that unifies our network together and helps us bridge the gap to communicate with other networks that manage and make decisions that impact plant communities and sustainable ecosystems. So that's people like public land managers and policymakers and tribal land managers and private landowners. And also getting that communication and education out about what the National Seed Strategy is and why native seeds are so important. And so with that, this is the end of our presentation highlighting the National Seed Strategy and its implication at both the national, regional, and grassroots or local level. So if you want more information on the seed strategy or want to help implement it, there is a website and an email address on this slide. And also on this slide is the contact information for all the presenters. So feel free to reach out to any of us with questions that you may have. So I think this gets turned back over to Kate now. And yep.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Fred and Peggy. That was wonderful. Just a few words here at the end. Thank you for sticking with us through that unfortunate technological low point. We appreciate it. I was able to make sure that the recording started at the beginning of Peggy. So you're going to miss me, but you will get all of Peggy and everyone else. And that recording will be processed and up as soon as humanly possible. A few things. It looks like we've got some questions, and I want to pause and make sure that everybody has time to answer questions. I know we're running short of time, but as long as you guys are willing to stay on and answer and ask, we are here for you. So we've got a question from Laura Garrison. Who'd like to address that one?
This is Peggy. I know of some of the work that's going on in the southern part of California. We've got a Mojave desert native plant program that we just hired a coordinator for within the last couple of years, Judy Perkins, but that's in the southern part of the state. And I know that the LA River Basin, they're trying to develop native seed there. But I'm not aware of anything in the Bay Area right now. I don't know if Fred or Sarah know anything on that.
Is that are any of you aware of local efforts in California and Bay Area in particular to great work happening in the Great Basin? So part of the Great Basin is in California. So we have that portion of California is tied in with the Great Basin Native Plant Project. And I'm not sure.
Yeah. I know BLM California State Office, Christina Lund, is working with her field offices and trying to develop, they are developing the partnerships at the field office level. I don't know any specifically of Northern California or the Bay Area. It's a little bit more difficult to do this by ecoregion in California because there's so many ecoregions. That can be a real challenge over there in figuring out how folks can work together.
However, we do have a very active program in Arcata, California, with Jennifer Wheeler. So then somebody asked a question about if you're a federal government agency and you hadn't signed on to the seed strategy, how can you get engaged? And if any other federal agency is interested, call me or send me email. We're happy. The federal committee is open and you can join late, or you can your agency can sign on along with us. And if you're a non-federal, you can join the Non-Federal Plant Conservation Alliance committee as well, and that would be working through the Chicago Botanic Garden, who is the non-federal committee chair.
We have a statement from Stephanie Frischi to everybody. I'm not sure if anybody can see it, but it's she mentions that Marin County and Golden Gate Parks Conservancy have non-federal native plant programs as well.
Great.
So
you want to take the next question, guys?
Yeah, so are there local regional native plant society chapters involved? And if so, who are they and where can we access a list of those partners? So that, back to what Peggy just said about the non-federal cooperators, there is a number of native plant societies involved with that. And if you, what is it, Peggy, the non-federal cooperators website?
I think if you go to www.plantconservationalliance.org, you can see the map of the United States, and it'll show you the number of partners or cooperators in each state, and then it'll show you who they are. So if you have trouble getting onto that, let us know, but www.plantconservationalliance.org. We're gonna put it on here right now.
So So the next one's for me about how was the threshold of 10 plus seed collections needed in order to start production determined. And so that number came from conversations with our folks within the Great Basin Native Plant Project that actually develop all those provisional and empirical seed zones, and that was a number that they gave us. So for more details on that, I would say to reach out to Francis Kilkenny, who is the Rocky Mountain Research Station component of the Great Basin Native Plant Project. And he's mine and Fred's partner.
Right. And there is no magic answer on that. It was just sort of a best guess.
There's a question from Brenda to all panelists. Are there any strategies to do assisted migration with regards to choosing appropriate species for climate change?
Well, we're doing assisted migration now, like Peggy said, but it's sort of a not a thought out process. So we're doing it now, whether we want to admit to it or not. We have thought, and there are some tools that are being developed, and one of them is called the seed selection tool, and you can put in your project area, and then you can look at what seed sources you might want to use or choose based on your project. So people are thinking about that, maybe not in the assisted migration kind of concept, but yeah, some folks are thinking about that and developing tools.
Question from Anna, does this strategy apply to non-timber tree species also?
Right, well, it's our goal. Right now, seed transfer guidance came from the forestry program. It's well established over there. There's no reason it should not work with, forbs and grasses and shrubs. So that's the whole goal, and that's what we're trying to do, is to apply this to non-timber species.
Okay, we got a question from Sean Stone asking, so far what seemed more successful? Networks of professionals in the same field or regional networks connecting all the different types of partners within this field, like collectors, researchers, farmers, ecologists?
Well, this is Peggy, and I would answer that by saying that it is really connecting all the different types of partners within the field. And that's what we've tried to do in both the Great Basin Native Plant Program, the Colorado Plateau Native Plant Program.
Lost Peggy.
Peggy dropped out.
With the same people that are in our network of same professionals. And so what we really need to do is make that network with the people that we don't usually talk to, which is one of the other issues here.
Yeah, and I want to echo, diversity of thought in this is a good thing. And yes, we may have some conflicts and we may approach things differently, but I think ultimately the product that comes out is going to be better.
And then the next question that came in that says, has anyone calculated demand by federal agencies, by state over the past 5 years? And if so, how do we get that information? We have not done a national assessment. We did get funding this year for a national assessment, but and we're going to be working through that or on that over the next year or so with the National Academy of Sciences. We did a scoping meeting at the February 2017 National Seeds Conference that was here in Washington, D.C., and we're hoping to broaden that into the national assessment full-blown here shortly.
Okay.
And I know that we're probably getting ready to shut down here because we've got another group coming into this meeting room. So can I just thank Natural Areas and all the folks that came, and Sarah and Fred for making this presentation work and for getting the information out to everybody. And everyone would be welcome to join into the program, okay?
Yeah, Peggy, you can log off. I just wanted to add to that. Thank everybody, Peggy, Fred, Sarah. And just thank you for being here. Thank you guys, all the registration, those who registered for this. We're thankful that you were here. If you have additional questions, I'm sure that nobody would would have a problem if you just emailed those additional questions to them. You can even email them to me, and I'll make sure that that they get them. Again, thanks to Peggy, Sarah, and Fred. The archive is going to be posted soon. Watch your email for more on the webinar series. If you're not on your our email list, please join. Please register for the conference right now. Do it now. And sign up so you can hear more. Thanks to everybody. Have a great day. And I think we are going to go ahead and log off. Mahalo to you, Dustin.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.